In this third part of the Civil War Brewing, we are going to continue showing extremely interesting things that are happening directly with what has to do in the United States, yes, but not only with what has to do now, but with what has to do in the near future. Be very attentive because once again, we will see how the prophecies are being fulfilled in front of us, and so many people do not even know about it because we must make them known. But be attentive to today and to the next conference, the next part that will continue, because what a lot of things we are going to see. As we have put on the front page, here you have the two people who can be transcendental for the politics of the United States and the world. Let's begin remembering, please, if you have not seen what we have presented on this issue of the Civil War in the United States, what is coming and what will come later, the second coming of Jesus. Please watch it, because you are going to be very surprised. And then you will understand better the first two parts before this one, which we have been presenting in this new subject, but which is intimately linked to all of this. Look at the news, as it has been happening, because of course, things are getting more and more complicated on all sides. The 5 security failures in the Trump assassination attempt. They mistook the attacker for another police force. We basically picked out 2 points that are non-essential. 2, failure of coordination. The reason this building was left vacant and unprotected, Cocho explains, was the coordination error by the security services. From where the attacker fired, he says. At the site there were several groups in charge of the protection of the Republican candidate and the attendees, local police, national police, and the Secret Service escorts that correspond to Donald Trump as former President of the United States. According to the expert, the Secret Service members, who finally shot down the attacker, noticed the presence of a person on top of the nearby building, but they thought it was a member of another security group, and not the perpetrator of the shooting, since the local police in some states have sniper teams. Overconfidence that another police force was there and misattribution of responsibility to each of the forces has possibly led to this unfortunate incident. This is what they allege. Yet another point. 3. A slow reaction and no command center. Along with the lack of coordination, the university professor points out that the agents were not fast enough in communicating with each other to know if this person was a threat or not. He argues that when the Secret Service made a security request and finally verified that it was an anonymous citizen, it was already too late. It is enough that it takes a minute to make the verification for adequate protection instructions to be given. In that time of uncertainty, the shooter shot at Trump. Cocho notes that if Trump had been the President of the United States, for protocol reasons, the police effort would have been much greater, and there would have been a counter-surveillance work to assess all possible risks. If there had been a command center, a single coordination center, there would not have been that lack of coordination. Well, this is what they now allege. And here you have the boy who they say did the massacre and the attempt to finish off the president. He was bullied and had poor aim. New details about the young man who shot Trump. Components of an improvised explosive device were discovered in his vehicle and at his home in Bethel Park, a relatively affluent suburb about an hour's drive from the crime scene. According to Jason Kohler, who attended the same high school as the shooter, who was gunned down in his assassination attempt, Crooks was bullied and no one would sit next to him at lunchtime, AP reported. In fact, other students teased him about his hunting attire he used to wear. I was bullied almost every day. He was an outcast, and you know how kids are these days, he recounted. Also, the young man is known to have received awards for his performance in math and science while studying at Bethel Park High School, from which he graduated in 2022. On the other hand, he tried out for the school's shooting team, but was rejected due to his poor marksmanship, revealed Frederick Mock, current captain of the shooting team. According to 2 of his classmates, quoted by the New York Post, Crooks shot with a small caliber rifle from a distance of 50 feet and missed a single target, with misfires reaching as far as 20 feet. Another classmate, Michael Dudjak, described Crooks as a relatively reserved and quiet person who was alone a lot. He does not recall the young man speaking out about politics or being active on social media. He said he learned of the news Saturday night in a setting of his school friends and that they were shocked and couldn't take in the news. Searching for clues. Crooks had an account on the Discord social platform, but it was little used and unused for months, the company spokesman recounted. We have found no evidence that it was used to plan this incident, promote violence, or discuss his political views, the representative commented. The young man had no history of mental disorders or criminal activity. The FBI stated Sunday that the shooter acted alone, but motives are still unknown. Note that he acted alone. You'll see why later. It has not been possible to get any clues on his cell phone, nor has the attacker left any manifests. The attack is being investigated as both an assassination attempt and a case of domestic terrorism, investigators said. Demolition Ranch. Images of the attacker's body revealed that he was wearing on the day of the attack a t-shirt from Demolition Ranch, a popular YouTube channel that posts videos of its creator testing handguns and assault rifles against all types of targets. Anyway, this is the information that is emerging about this guy. Some say that he also appears in videos of a famous corporation that is quite dangerous. Anyway, the thing is that I have not been able to see him, I can't say for sure, and therefore I am not going to say much more about it. But check this out. Trump is officially the Republican candidate for the U.S. presidency. Yeah, it's been given. Yeah, it's been approved. And look at this little sign you see here. You see it's next to somebody else, right? And it says his name on it. This Monday, it was also revealed that James David Vance will be Donald Trump's vice presidential running mate in the 2024 election. The Republican Party's social media accounts have begun posting images featuring the candidates for president and vice president with the slogan, "Our winning ticket." Well, we already have one and the other, and today, we'll talk about the other one quite a bit. Trump announces who will be his vice president. That's what we've seen. There were several candidates. In the end, he has chosen, the one he has chosen, and let's see a little bit what they tell us about this. The former president wrote on his social network Truth Social, after long deliberations and reflections, and taking into account the enormous talent of many others, I have decided that the most suitable person to assume the office of Vice President of the United States is Senator James David Vance, from the great state of Ohio. And there you have it. Trump described the politician's merits, including his studies at Ohio State University and service in the Marine Corps. He has had a successful business career in technology and finance, and now, on the campaign trail, he will focus especially on the people he fought so brilliantly for, the American workers and farmers of Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio, Minnesota, and beyond, he said. Trump reveals he completely rewrote his speech at the Republican National Convention. James David Vance has repeatedly spoken out against funding the Ukrainian conflict and seizing Russian assets. In addition, he has stated that its resolution requires consolidation of Ukraine's neutrality and freezing of territorial disputes, which means that Kyiv must recognize the territories of Donetsk, Lugansk, Kherson, and Zaporizhzhia as Russian. On the Ukrainian issue in particular, everyone with a brain in their head knows that this is going to end with negotiations. Ukraine is functionally destroyed as a country, he once said. Well, we're already seeing their delineations, aren't we? Well, we're going to see quite a bit more here to the Donets together, both of them. Anti-immigration, against helping Kyiv, and critical of climate policies. That's J.D. Vance, Trump's vice president. Well, Trump's vice president. I say president because they are already saying that 4 years from now he can be the perfect replacement for Donald Trump. I can't stand Trump. I fear he is taking the white working class to a very dark place. These words were pronounced in 2016 by the one who this Monday was designated by Trump as his electoral tandem in the face of the U.S. presidential elections. J.D. Vance will be his vice president and right hand if, as the polls say, the tycoon ends up taking the Oval Office in November. Of those criticisms made 8 years ago, nothing remains. Neither from Vance nor from the party. The nomination of this senator from Ohio is not only an example of how Trump has won the support of dissenting Republican voices, but also of the direction his policies will take in the face of a possible second term, focused on combating immigration, critical of climate policies, against aid to Ukraine, and in favor of unconditional support for Israel. Well, we've got the whole package now, but how interesting. First a lot of criticism, and now there's nothing left of that at all, criticism of Donald Trump. The same thing Nikki Haley has done, and others have done, who now happen to support him as well, unconditionally Donald Trump. Notice how this denotes what? That this kind of politics sucks, or call it what you will. But here's the situation. What a picture. And all these people are the ones who should rule the world. So what? Let's go well. The Republican Party is no longer in doubt and is demonstrating unprecedented unity around the former president, who received a hero's welcome Monday at the Republican National Convention after the assassination attempt he suffered last Saturday at a rally in Pennsylvania. It was to be expected. However, Trump's path to complete control of the party apparatus has not been an easy one. In fact, the former president himself claimed during Vance's 2022 Senate campaign that Vance was kissing his ass because he needs the support. Well, I know that in Latin America, these words are going to be a scandal. In Spain, this is very common and nothing happens. But he said, kissing the ass because he needs the support. Months later, at a joint rally in Ohio, they closed ranks and Trump defined him as a young star, a great senator and a real fighter. Already a senator, J.D. publicly apologized to Trump for the 2016 statements and called them a mistake. Okay, and that's how it all worked out. When it's in the interest for something to change, it's done, and that's it. Nothing happens. Vance, 39 years old. He's too young. Now faces a position that in Trump's last term, held by Mike Pence, had little influence. But this time it could be different, as it may serve as a springboard to make the vice president the Republican nominee in the 2028 election, since in those elections Trump will no longer be eligible. Well, 2028, the year of the Sunday law, what a thing. With this decision, Trump is trying to reach out to a sector that was costing him more than his fair share, working middle-class voters in Midwestern states. Vance's personal history is going to appeal to many in the party and to those who don't have a great interest in politics. Robert Alexander, a professor of political science at Ohio Northern University. Before being considered one of the party's budding figures and having begun his political career in the Senate, Vance suffered a childhood exposed to violence, guns, and drug use in Middletown. Trump's number 2 went from that personal drama and later becoming a Marine in the Iraq War to being one of America's hottest and best-selling writers. Vance left his jobs in Californian law firms and tech to write his memoirs in 2016 in a book titled A Rural Elegy. He then began his media projection at the hands of the New York Times or CNN as a political commentator. Check out how he was positioning himself in short. Immigration, climate change, and Ukraine. In those years, J.D. Vance appeared as a more moderate profile, but as his political career has progressed, he has been veering towards a conservatism closer to the populist movement MAGA, acronym of the slogan Make America Great Again, created by his now running mate, Donald Trump. Vance supports extreme anti-abortion and anti-LGBT policies. He is against this. He supports extreme against policies. Pay attention to what I said, not just against abortion, but against LGBT people, and you'll see why I emphasize it. In addition, he has defended Israeli attacks on Gaza and attacked the Biden administration for its economic management. But these are not the only aspects that he shares or has adapted to Trump's speech. One of the most resounding is that of immigration. Vance defends Trump's theory that immigrants are poisoning the blood of the country. Already as a senator, he introduced a bill known as the Timely Departure Act, which ultimately failed to pass, which would require that foreigners wishing to enter the United States on temporary visas should pay between $5,000 and $15,000 in a bond or cash payment to the Department of Homeland Security. The aliens would get the money back if they left the U.S. in accordance with the terms of their visas. Another position he shares and has been most active in is opposition to the economic aid that the Biden administration has given to Ukraine. In fact, JD led a campaign to block the $60 billion package. In addition, Vance has called it a fantasy to believe that Ukraine can return to its pre-2022 borders and has repeatedly called for Kyiv to halt its operations and negotiate as soon as possible. As the New York Times reports, the vice presidential candidate went so far as to say in an interview with the controversial Steve Bannon that he really doesn't care what happens to Ukraine. Finally, his position on climate policies has also brought him criticism from non-governmental organizations and the Democratic wing. Like Trump, Vance questions the human hand behind climate change and assures that the climate has been changing for millennia. He is also in favor of eliminating subsidies for electric vehicles and allocating those amounts to a linear subsidy of $7,500 for the purchase of combustion engine vehicles, as long as they are made in the United States, since one of the main criticisms of these measures is that they will benefit Chinese companies. You have already all his positions, very interesting, and it highlights not only that I have said about LGTB, but this unconditional support to Israel, and that he doesn't give a damn, in short, what happens to Ukraine. This means that, one way or another, something is going to happen so that Russia can continue to do things, which will lead to prophetic fulfillment all the way to Israel. Yes, something must happen for this to happen, either because of the civil war in the United States, which gives them a free hand, or because there is a blessing from the U.S. government for them to go ahead. In the end, time will tell. Here you have the data that Wikipedia gives about J.D. Vance. American politician, financier, and writer. James David Vance, born James Donald Bowman. There was a name change here. Middletown, Ohio, August 2nd, 1984. Is an American conservative politician, businessman, and writer. A member of the Republican Party, since 2023 he has served as a United States Senator from Ohio. He is best known for his memoir Hillbilly Elegy, which became popular during the 2016 election. Of course, here in the U.S. this will be known to you. In the rest of the world it doesn't ring a bell, but he became a famous writer. He is currently the Republican vice presidential candidate alongside Donald Trump in the 2024 presidential election. Here you have his picture. Religion: Catholicism. Yes, he is Catholic. Educated at Middletown High School until 2003. Ohio State University until 2009. But also Yale Law School, J.D., until 2013. Well, the Yale theme was supposed to come up too, in the middle. Now, if you don't know what this is about, take a look at lecture number 1 of 2006 of The Great Deception. You'll understand a little bit of what this is about. Here you have the biography of him, that before we have read something about him, already in concrete. You see him photographed as a U.S. Marine Corps infantryman, and interestingly enough, he met his wife, lawyer Usha Chilukuri, with whom he has 3 children. His mistress, it turns out, is, well, of Indian descent. So, some things are strange, aren't they? Against immigration, on the other hand, he does this. Well, let's move on. He converted to Catholicism in 2019 at St. Gertrudis Dominican Priory in Cincinnati, Ohio. Look, Dominican Priory, well, the truth is that when we present the issues, if God wills, about the Cathars, you will see who the Dominicans really were, they still are, but how they functioned. And when you understand that way of functioning of the Dominicans, well, you will see where he can go too. And the prophecies will sooner or later come to fulfillment. The Dominicans had a great weight before, they will have it again, yes, not only the Jesuits. He was accompanied at the ceremony to convert to Catholicism. His friend Rod Dreher. Keep this name, because later we will see who his friend Rod Dreher is. In particular, he insists on his campaign to close the border with Mexico. He's talking about Vance's now. The unrestricted exploitation of energy resources and the reduction of government spending. Look, unrestricted exploitation of energy resources, this means oil for, land for sure. In February 2022, a few days before the start of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, he declared on television, "I'll be honest with you, I don't care what happens to Ukraine." Interviewed in April of the same year by the far-right website, The Gateway Pundit, J.D. Vance made conspiratorial statements about fentanyl, accusing Joe Biden of wanting to kill Donald Trump supporters by facilitating the distribution of this drug. His campaign received huge financial backing. Billionaire Peter Thiel pumped in $15 million. We'll see who he is later, too. And a political action committee, PAC, controlled by Mitch McConnell, $28 million. We'll see who that is, too. Did you get their names? Well, if you don't remember it well, we'll see later. Look at the ideological positions, which are described here at some length. Abortion. Vance opposes abortion. When asked if abortion laws should include exceptions for rape and incest, he said two wrongs don't make a right. Sure, his position. Sex changes. Vance has proposed a bill that would make medical care for gender affirmation in minors a federal crime and block the use of taxpayer funds for it, stating, "Under no circumstances should doctors be allowed to perform these gruesome and irreversible operations on minor children." Check out his positions, so moralistic, don't you think? Remember what we have been saying for so many years, that the prophecy was marked, that there will be a return to morality, well, false morality, because on one side one thing and on the other, another. From behind, you know. Why do I say this? You will see. Families. In a 2021 speech at the Intercollegiate Studies Institute, Vance blamed the childless left for America's problems. He praised conservative Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban for encouraging married couples to have children and said parents should have more of a say in how democracy works than those without children. Then about Viktor Orban we will also show something. Immigration. Vance once admonished Trump for demonizing immigrants, but has repeatedly called the effects of illegal immigration dirty. Almost nothing. He supported Trump's proposal to build a wall along the southern border and has rejected the idea that border wall advocates are racists. Vance has proposed spending $3 billion to finish the border wall. In 2022, he told Tucker Carlson that Democrats have decided they can't win re-election in 2022 unless they bring in a large number of new voters to replace the voters who are already here. All in all, it's also worth saying that those migrants who are coming to the United States so many times are Catholics, and that will also serve to support the morale issue when they get to vote. Foreign policy. Speaking at the Munich Security Conference, Vance said that the United States did not want to withdraw from the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, known as NATO. But he argued that it should shift its attention to East Asia and that certain European countries and NATO members were not spending enough on their own security. Does this sound familiar? Same thing Donald Trump said. Vance is an outspoken critic of U.S. military aid to Ukraine during the Russo-Ukrainian War. He has said it is in the U.S. interest to accept that Ukraine will have to cede some territory to the Russians. Vance has faced criticism from these for his views on Ukraine. In December 2023, he was criticized for calling for the suspension of more aid to Ukraine because he said it would be used so that his ministers could buy on already large issues, meaning that corruption in Ukraine is brutal. Vance supports U.S. funding to Israel in the Israel-Hamas war. This he surely supports. Again, you see what line he is going on. It is also interesting to see that NATO will ultimately have to get its act together without the United States to do certain things. This is interesting because you can imagine what this could lead to. Homosexual unions. Vance opposes the Respect for Marriage Act and has said, "I believe marriage is between a man and a woman." He's been clear, hasn't he? The moral spin, remember that. Personal life. Vance was raised in a conservative evangelical branch of Protestantism, but in September 2016 was thinking very seriously about converting to Catholicism. In August 2019, Vance was baptized and confirmed into the Catholic Church in a ceremony at St. Gertrude Priory in Cincinnati, Ohio. What we have said about the Dominicans. He chose St. Augustine of Hippo as his confirmation saint. Vance said he converted because he became convinced over time that Catholicism was true, and Augustine gave me a way of understanding the Christian faith in a strongly intellectual way, further describing the influence of Catholic theology on his political views. Well, that's clear. But how interesting, you say that he became convinced over time that Catholicism was true. When, logically, if one studies the Bible and history, and follows the events, and what is going on behind the scenes, evidently what one would realize is that Catholicism is precisely the opposite of true Christianity. But in short, each one is putting his pawns where it touches. For the final world panorama, everything is being prepared, and when they make these people rise to power, practically almost consummated. Only the votes are missing. You can already imagine why it is, can't you? How many times have we said that Catholicism is the one that is going to pull the strings in the United States, and that this total ecumenism with Protestantism, and although Protestantism will continue to be the majority, it will have that weight and that moral support of Catholicism, which in the end will make the second beast of the prophecy of Revelation 13 yield the power and authority, to whom? To the first, to the United States, to Rome in short. Well, if we do not see how everything is being prepared, seeing all this, we certainly do not want to know anything. Moreover, now, let's see who it is, Rod Dreher. We have seen before, and I have told you, keep that name. Here it is this person. Rod Dreher, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, February 14th. 1967, is an American journalist and writer, author of The Benedict Option and Living Without Lies, a handbook for Christian dissent. Interesting, the Benedictine option. Benedictine? Well, if you know anything about the Benedictine option. All in all, what a thing. Anyway, let's move on. Religion. Obviously. Catholicism. Biography. He was born in a small town in Louisiana, in the bosom of a Methodist family who lived a superficial Christianity without going to church. During his youth, he lost his faith. When he was 20 years old, he underwent a profound conversion to Catholicism that transformed him into a fervent believer. Look, what a change from one to the other. A graduate of Louisiana State University, he was a columnist for the New York Post and also a columnist for the Dallas Morning News. He has written for National Review, Sun Sentinel, The Washington Times. He is now a columnist for the American Conservative. Interesting, conservative subject. In 1993, he moved to Washington, D.C., where he forged his identity as a theorist and thinker, taking on a more combative side as a Catholic intellectual and journalist. He considered himself a cultural warrior, defending conservatism both from politics and faith. Later, during his time in New York, this attitude was reinforced. In 2002, he wrote an essay in the National Review defining a subcategory of conservatism in the United States that he called granola conservatism. These types of conservatives are said to be more sympathetic to the environment and frugal living, while being supporters of the traditional family, skeptical of the capitalist free market and, in most cases, religious. 4 years later, he published his book, Crunchy Cons, to explain how Birkenstock Birkins, pro-gun organic growers, evangelical-minded traditional ranchers, and homeschooling mothers are transforming America, or at least the Republican Party. Raised Methodist, he converted to Catholicism. After covering the Catholic Church's sex abuse scandal, which began in 2001, led him to question his Catholicism, and on October 12, 2006, he announced his conversion to the Orthodox Church. At the time, Dreher had argued that the scandal was not so much a pedophile problem, but that the sexual abuse of minors is facilitated by a powerful secret network of homosexual priests, known as the Mafia, Lavender. You see what changes he is making in this regard. In 2018, he published the book The Benedict Option, a strategy for Christians in a post-Christian society, in which he developed the idea of a Benedictine bid to live as Christians in a world that is no longer Christian. The Benedictine option is a regrouping of Christians, following and adopting the method established by Saint Benedict of Nuremberg, to move in a society increasingly distant from God. The book was considered by the New York Times as the most discussed and important religious book of the last decade. In his book, Living Without Lies, a handbook for Christian dissent, he gives voice to Alexander Solzhenitsyn and other Eastern European dissidents who warned of the danger of a soft totalitarianism in the Western world, based more on psychological manipulation than overt violence. The book is a guide to arguments whose stated aim is to help every believer to cope in an increasingly hostile society. Anyway, this is the person who was so closely associated with him, and here you have one of the donors. Peter Thiel. Peter Andreas Thiel, October 11, 1967, in Frankfurt am Main, Federal Republic of Germany, is an entrepreneur, hedge fund manager, and venture capitalist. Religion. He says it is Christianity. Does not specify denomination. Thiel co-founded PayPal, along with Elon Musk, and served as its CEO. He is currently part of the company, Clarium Capital, a macro-global hedge fund that manages over $2 billion, and is a managing partner of the Founders Fund, a $275 million venture capital fund founded by Ken Howery and Lucas Nosek in 2004. He was an early investor in Facebook, the popular social networking website, and is on its board of directors. He is not poor, you see, evidently. In 2007, he received the honor of being named a Young Global Leader by the World Economic Forum as one of the 250 most distinguished leaders aged 40 and under. He is also reported to have attended the elitist and highly secretive Bilderberg Group conference in 2007 and 2008. Well, when you see how he's already named as a Young Global Leader by the World Economic Forum, you say ouch. And when you see this other Bilderberg Group thing, ouch, ouch, well, let's keep going. Thiel married his partner. Partner, he says. Matt Danzeisen in October 2017 in Vienna, Austria. Danzeisen works as a portfolio manager at Thiel Capital. Do you understand anything now? But if the other friend of his, who is the one who receives this won the money from him, and he happens to be anti-LGBTB, and look where the donations from LGBTB go to him, through this. What a thing, isn't it? And this one too, is he so Christian? There are things that, of course, when you start to analyze them, you say, what is this? What madness is this? What poti-poti, what a mixture of things. Well, it is mind-boggling. Well, let's continue, because now we are going to see Mitch McConnell, who you already know him, because he has also become famous for some of his situations, how he also, at certain times, stands before others while he is talking, so that you understand me, how he stands, he doesn't even know where he is. Addison Mitchell Mitch McConnell, Sheffield, Alabama, February 20th, 1942, is an American politician affiliated with the Republican Party. He currently represents the state of Kentucky in the Senate and is the Republican minority leader. He is the longest-serving senator to represent Kentucky. Religion. Presbyterian. Politics. In his early years as a politician in Kentucky, McConnell was known as a pragmatist and a moderate Republican. Over time, he moved to the right. According to one of his biographers, McConnell transformed from a moderate Republican, a moderate who supported abortion rights and public employee unions, to the epitome of partisan obstructionism and conservative orthodoxy on Capitol Hill. Look how he positions himself next. In the political crisis of the 2013 U.S. government shutdown, McConnell's action was instrumental in bringing about a solution to the political gridlock and enabling the reopening of federal services across the country. In 2017, he was one of 22 senators who signed a letter calling on Donald Trump to pull the United States out of the Paris Agreement. According to the NGO Center for Responsive Politics, McConnell has received more than $1,542,000 from pro-oil, pro-gas, and pro-coal lobbyists since 2012. So you'd expect him to support all this business, too. In December 2020, and in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, McConnell opposed raising the economic stimulus checks from $600 to $2,000, vetoing the decision that was covenanted by the Democratic opposition and President Trump in addition to much of the Republican Party, which caused him much criticism. In January 2021, McConnell expressed his support in favor of the second impeachment process to Trump, although he ultimately voted against it on February 14, 2021. Check it out, that's a switch back and forth. Interesting, isn't it? Okay, so these are the people associated with this gentleman that Mr. Trump has put in as vice president. And here you have Usha Vance's connections to the Supreme Court justices that are causing concern. It is the wife, and you see, from her appearance, that she is evidently not Swedish. The wife of Donald Trump's formula partner worked for 2 Supreme Court justices, and some liberals are concerned about the possible implications of this. The former president announced Ohio's J.D. Vance as his White House nominee at the Republican National Convention on Monday. It didn't take long for attention to turn to Vance's wife, Usha, currently a corporate litigator at a firm representing clients in the entertainment, technology, energy, and healthcare industries, according to LinkedIn Superfill. But most of the attention is focused on her previous roles, when she clerked for Brett Kavanaugh before he became a Supreme Court Justice, and current Chief Justice John Roberts. Both men are part of the conservative 6-3 majority on the highest court. History writer Michael Harriot was among those who posted on social media about the concerns this sparked. He shared a screenshot of an article presenting this information and wrote, "Wait. Trump's VP nominee's wife worked for Chief Justice John Roberts and Brett Kavanaugh? I'm sure that won't matter in a contested election. Anyway, you see where they are moving." In the meantime, this news appeared. Democrats will choose Biden as their presidential nominee early. Normally, the official nomination takes place at the Democratic National Convention to be held in Chicago on August 19th. Interesting, because that's about the time we will have been speaking about all this in Chicago itself. What a coincidence, my goodness. President Joe Biden will receive the official presidential nomination for a second term from fellow Democrats in a virtual vote in late July, ahead of the party's national convention. And despite calls for him to withdraw his campaign, Reuters reported, citing 4 people involved in the matter. So they will do it ahead of schedule. Why? Well, it's their trump card. Why exactly are they doing it? Well, it seems that the only thing they want to achieve is that there really is a loss of votes from him, and that Donald Trump is declared the winner, because if not, it is hard to understand. But even so, you know what is going to happen. They said that none of them will accept defeat, either from one side or from the other. That is what we presented in the conferences that I told you at the beginning, that we presented in North Carolina. So what can we expect? Confrontation. In short, they predict disaster for Kyiv and the EU after Trump's choice of Vance as vice presidential candidate. James David Vance, the U.S. vice presidential candidate for the Republican Party, has proved to be a controversial politician, with statements in which he assures that Donald Trump will put an end to the Ukrainian conflict in case he wins the elections. On the other hand, he advocates continuing to support Israel and focusing on the confrontation with China, which he considers to be the biggest threat. Despite his closeness to Trump, Vance criticized him harshly before he won the 2016 election. We have seen some of this, so now you can watch the video. J.D. Vance, the Republican Party's U.S. vice presidential nominee, stressed in recent statements that Donald Trump would put a quick closure to the Ukrainian conflict in case of winning the November elections. The politician repeatedly criticized the aid provided by Washington to Kyiv, although his intentions are far from peaceful. He affirms that Israel should continue to be supported and focus on the confrontation with China, which he considers to be the greatest threat. Despite showing himself as a great ally of Trump, he used to criticize him harshly. Then, the question is, who is J.D. Vance? We are going to ask Martin Alvarez. What's up, Martin? Tell us, who is this political figure? Hello, Mauricio. Who is James David Vance, the Republican vice presidential candidate, who claims that if Trump wins, he would quickly move to end the Ukrainian conflict? Let's look at what he said in a recent interview. It's very simple. We have to point this out. Russia would not have invaded Ukraine if Donald Trump had been president. Everybody agrees with that. Even many of my Democratic colleagues privately agree with that. Here again is the question. We've already spent $200 billion. What's the goal? What are we trying to achieve? Is there a risk of escalation toward nuclear war? Because there is, when you have a buffoon running foreign policy, and right now we have a bunch of them in Washington. I think what President Trump has promised to do is to go there, negotiate with the Russians and the Ukrainians. And Trump quickly shut this thing down, so the U.S. can focus on the real problem, which is China. That's the biggest threat. Let's review the profile of this Republican politician who is 39 years old, is a U.S. Senator from Ohio, a former member of the U.S. Marine Corps. He was in Iraq. He is also a writer and former venture capitalist in Silicon Valley. In this sense, the current president of the United States, Joe Biden, says he is more of the same. He is the same as Donald Trump. Let's see what the president said. He is a Trump clone on the issues, so I don't see any difference between them. This rather controversial politician, James David Vance, which is how he is also treated by the media, from Politico they say, that this election portends disaster for Europe and Ukraine. They also mentioned that this is a message for the European continent to elect a politician who considers that the United Kingdom is now an Islamist country with nuclear weapons, making reference, for example, to the victory of the Labour Party in British territory, and also in comparison with his rival in these elections, the Democrat Kamala Harris, mentioning in other media that J.D. Vance will surely win the debate between the two candidates to the vice presidency. Also, we can see in the course of foreign policy what he considers. As we saw, he is against support for Ukraine. He believes that assistance to Israel should be continued, and he also believes that the main threat to the United States is China, which should be focused on confrontation with the Asian giant. But as we see, this is a very controversial figure, and we can see that a few years ago, he had a completely different opinion in 2016. He was an assertive opponent of Donald Trump, whom he treated as the Hitler of the United States and a moral disaster, while now we see that he was the chosen running mate in this race to the White House for the next presidential elections, which raises a lot of questions about this nomination. We thank you. You see, the video is extremely interesting. It is clear that he says that the Russians are not the problem, that the problem is China, and it is against them that they must prepare, and well, all the rest of the things that many have to do with what we have already presented. The support for Israel will obviously continue, once again before very much against Trump, calling him even a Hitler, and now you see totally on his side. Once again, this policy is disgusting. And it is hard to think that now there are still politicians who are of the stature of those of so many years ago, because when you see where they are going and how they move when it is convenient, it is impressive. And above all, you realize that someone pulls the strings to change both the thinking of people, to lead them to be used for a particular purpose. This obviously does not happen just because someone pulls the strings, and we are already seeing who. Anyway, lo and behold, now it looks like this too. 3 eyewitnesses emerged of a second shooter in the water tower. But they said he had acted alone, and now this appears. Here it is reported at. Peppa's grandma at X.com reports that so far 3 eyewitnesses have surfaced of a second shooter in the water tower behind the roof from where the killer was shooting. That is, from behind. NBC News reporter says in the interview she does with another woman, "You get out of there while you start processing this. I know we'll all be processing them in the coming days and weeks. How do you feel right now at this point?" Witness named Aaron, "Well, what I heard here is that they now feel that there were 2 shooters on both sides. So they got the one on the tower on this side, but they never got the one on the right. That's why they wanted us to leave right away, because they thought there was still a shooter out there somewhere. So there could be in these woods around Butler." NBC News reporter, Aaron, "You know I've covered a lot of Trump campaign events. I don't know how many you've attended. I was here. I was the 4th car in the parking lot this morning. Well, now more people are emerging now saying that there was a second shooter behind the other one, and that one we don't know anything about. Look, here is the video where this interview is shown."
You're out of there as you're starting to process this. I know we'll all be processing this over the coming days and weeks. How are you feeling now in this moment?
Well, what I've heard coming out here is now they feel that there was 2 shooters on both sides. So they got the one on the tower on this side, but the one on the right side they never got. So that's why they wanted us to leave immediately, because they thought there's still a shooter out there somewhere. So there could be in these woods around Butler.
Aaron, you know, I've covered many Trump rallies. I don't know how many you've been to.
My 6th. This is your. I was here. I was the 4th car in the parking lot this morning.
Well, this is interesting because the media, at least around here, are not echoing all this. Anyway, once again, it gives food for thought. This sounds like John Fitzgerald Kennedy. Of course, how not to feed conspiracy theories, they call them, when there are all these situations. But hey, look. The U.S. detected an Iranian plot to assassinate Trump weeks before the attack. The Secret Service had reinforced the former president's security due to threats from Iran. U.S. intelligence agencies obtained information about an Iranian plot to assassinate the former president and Republican candidate, Donald Trump, 2017 to 2021. Weeks before last Saturday's attack, sources familiar with the matter confirmed. These sources, however, stress that there is no link between this Iranian plan and the attempted assassination of Trump, which occurred on Saturday at a rally in Butler, Pennsylvania, when a 20-year-old man shot at the former president, wounding him in the ear and killing one of the attendees of the event. Although there is no apparent link, at the time of Saturday's attack, the Secret Service had reinforced the former president's security precisely because of these threats from Iran, these sources detailed. Curious, they had reinforced the security of the former president, of Trump, because they say that there was this Iranian plan to kill Donald Trump. Well, it's a good thing they reinforced it, because otherwise. So, the question now is why these additional measures that were implemented due to the Iranian plot did not prevent the attacker, identified as Thomas Matthew Crooks, from climbing onto a rooftop and firing several shots before being shot by Secret Service agents. As stated by a senior national security official, upon detecting the threat, the White House alerted both the Trump campaign and the Secret Service, which took additional measures to protect the former president of the added danger. Well, if he didn't take them, then what? All this is extremely interesting, because you see things that you don't understand anywhere. Well, it is necessary to add that Iran has already said that they have never done anything to try to kill, no plan or anything, to kill Donald Trump. Of course, you know, some will say one thing, others another, and the usual, but what a thing, isn't it? They add more security, and did it do any good? And pay attention to this news as well. Trump willing to be peace mediator in Ukraine, Orban tells skeptical European leaders. Trump says that, with him, Ukraine and Israel would not have been overrun. It's interesting because we've seen how the vice president now, who may be totally from the U.S., also in that video was talking that with Donald Trump in charge, the war in Ukraine would not have happened. Well, look at this. Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orban told European leaders that Donald Trump is willing to act as a peace mediator between Russia and Ukraine if elected president, amid concern across the continent that Trump will try to force Kiev to cede territory to Moscow. Orban's letter, addressed to European Council President Charles Michel and sent to all European Union leaders, was written in the wake of his controversial meetings with former President Trump, Russian President Vladimir Putin, and Chinese leader Xi Jinping. Yes, and this has caused an uproar, in Europe, brutal, because he happens to be the president now, of the European Union. Of course you know that this is rotating. It lasts a few months, and it is Mr. Orban of Hungary, and the first thing he does is to go to see Vladimir Putin, Xi Jinping, and everyone complaining why he is doing that, and of course, now he is also saying this question. I can state with confidence that soon after his election victory, he will not wait until his inauguration. Trump will be ready to act as a peace mediator immediately. He has detailed and well-founded plans for this, Orban wrote. Hungary's authoritarian prime minister has sought to set himself up as a peacemaker in the conflict, but his stance clashes with that of most European Union leaders, who pledged unequivocal support for Ukraine as it seeks to repel the Russian military effort. In his letter to those leaders, Orban said that during the meetings there was a general observation that the intensity of the military conflict in Ukraine will radically escalate in the near future. And here you see him, shaking hands with Donald Trump in 2019. Will there be intensity of military conflict in Ukraine? If it is not avoided, that's what it all looks like. Orban also alluded to Trump's plans to potentially cut aid to Ukraine if he is elected. I am more than convinced that in the likely outcome of President Trump's victory, the ratio of the financial burden between the United States and the European Union will shift significantly to the detriment of the European Union in terms of financial support to Ukraine. With which, if the U.S. doesn't help Ukraine financially, all the burden will be on Europe to defray that war spending. What are they going to do? Well, try to sink Europe as well. Trump, who has a propensity for making sweeping pronouncements on foreign policy, said during a CNN town hall last year that if I'm president, I'll have that war resolved in a day, 24 hours. Anyway, we end this part here today. We are going to have a continuation, because we are seeing that there is a whole line, which has to do with, and it didn't seem like it, apparently to many people, they don't even think about it, that there is an impressive religious issue behind it. Well, God willing, in the continuation of this conference, we are going to see what things are coming out at the religious level with the attack of Donald Trump, and we can get ready because the return to morality and the power of Catholicism and of the Virgin, yes, and of the Virgin, and I put it in quotation marks so that you do not understand that it is the real Virgin Mary, is going to cause havoc. Stay tuned to what we will present tomorrow, because this is certainly not to be missed. All the prophecies are accumulating in a very fast way, precisely in this end time, and so it was prophesied. Ellen White, the servant of the Lord, the prophetess, wrote that the last events would be very fast. And boy, they are being so we can already prepare ourselves. Maranatha 2021, God bless you.